We live in calls to emptiness. Stories of Ukrainians whose loved ones disappeared during the war and have not been in touch for weeks. Kirill, 24, comes from Mariupol. The guy immediately tells us that this is the second time his family has experienced war. The first was in 2014, when his hometown was under the control of the military of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic for several months. Kirill left Mariupol 6 months ago, and for more than 2 weeks he has not known what happened to his relatives who remain in the city. There are thousands of people like Kirill in Ukraine. We publish 3 stories of people who lost their loved ones in this war, but hope not forever. The more I don't hear from them, the more I think something might have happened. Kirill lived with his girlfriend in Kiev and caught the war there as well. Because of the fighting, the couple evacuated to Ternopil in western Ukraine. The guy is safe now, but he can hardly be reassured. His relatives, who remained in Mariupol, last contacted him on March 2nd. I'm looking for Yelena and Valery Pikno. They're my mom and dad, Lyubov Lysenko and Yevgenia Pikno, my grandmothers. The last time we talked, my mom was surprised I got through to her. There were already problems with the connection. We only managed to talk for a minute. There were interruptions, something whistled in the tube, and we had to quickly ask how everything was, if everything was okay. Mom said then that they lived on the first floor of the house, and when they heard explosions and shelling, they went down to the basement. My dad went to get water. She also, calmed me down. Said that even if they stopped contacting me, that I would not worry. They would be all right. I hope that everything is all right, says Kirill. What about the house where his family used to live? Kirill tries to find out from satellite images. What about his relatives is on social networks. Every day the guy monitors all the Telegram channels and chats related to Mariupol. There he also learns information about the city as a whole, often relayed by those who managed to evacuate. My whole day is spent on the phone, on the news, looking for at least a clue. I know that they are all together on the left bank of the city, in a 5-story building. There's no electricity or heating in the city, and it's very hard to get a connection there right now. Usually people manage to contact their relatives in the center, on the right bank, describes the interlocutor. The entire city of Mariupol is being shelled right now. It's the Vostochny microdistrict, which is near the left bank, that is taking the heaviest hit. They can't get water there, but they bring it to people in the center. They say the bridge connecting the parts of the city was destroyed. Kirill says that when he called his relatives, they told him they stocked up on water. But the boy does not know how long it will last. The stores are closed, there are no outlets or wells where it would be possible to draw water. After 2014, when the city was shelled for the first time, people were constantly buying and storing canned food just in case. That is, now everything was not bought at the beginning of the war either. It was already lying around before the conflict began, so relatives had canned food, but, again, I don't know how long it would last. No one thought it would be so hard and long. There was information that locals cooked on the fire in the yards. When it was snowing, people tried to melt it to get the water. When it rained, they collected it from the roof. I think mine do that, too, and I hope the residents of the house take care of each other and that their folks are okay. Kirill left a request to publish a post with the search for his loved ones in the popular Telegram channel, Poshik Niklich. Its name translates from Ukrainian to Russian as, search for the missing. While no one has contacted the guy, he continues to live in anxiety. I can work remotely, but I can't. All my thoughts are only about this situation. I feel very bad. I just feel a terrible emptiness. And the worst thing is that I cannot do anything about it. The first 24 hours it was a little easier because it happened before, when there was no communication for a day or two and then my mother and I called each other. But now every day I feel more and more afraid, more and more bad thoughts come into my head. The more I don't hear from them, the more I think something may have happened. I don't even know how to describe this condition. But you can't give up, you have to try to do something. I'm talking to volunteers, looking for someone who can take mom, dad and the grandmothers. There are no such people yet, but I'm still looking for a car, fuel for volunteers, if I do find them. I think if my family had a car, they would drive themselves out of there. They just don't have anything, Kirill said tiredly. My sister said that shelling had begun and they were being taken to one of the nearby basements. After that, communication disappeared. Quote, Alexandra lived in Irpin, near Kiev. On February 24, after a rocket attack on Gostomel Airport, which was a few kilometers from her home, the girl and her family left for safety. Her cousin with her husband and 6-month-old baby decided to stay in Irpin. My sister's name is Yana Guranova, her husband is Maxim Guranov, and their little girl is Dasha. When everything began, there was a terrible turmoil and lack of understanding what to do and where to go. We decided to leave after all. Her sister's parents offered to take her and her daughter to their place, but she and her husband refused, evidently hoping that we would be able to wait it out, recalls the day of departure Alexandra. They kept in touch with us until March 5th. At that time things were already bad in Irpin. Their part of town was occupied by Russian troops, and civilians were shot in the streets. On that day, Yana called her parents and acquaintances and told them they were going to evacuate through the Green Corridor. Then she called her mother again to tell her that shelling had begun and they were being taken to one of the nearby basements. Unfortunately, we don't know who it was, volunteers or ordinary townspeople. After that, the connection disappeared. We appealed to the police, but so far to no avail. In Irpin, too, there is no cell phone and electricity. Jana's relatives do not know whether her family has food and water in the basement. During our last conversation, the girl only had time to say that there were people there with her who helped her. There has been fighting in Irpin every day since then. Many times there were evacuations of civilians from the city, but her sister has never been in touch. On about the same dates, local authorities warned people that the Russian military was conducting a fake evacuation. They were trying to put people in buses and take them to an unknown destination. Recently there was information that people could have been taken to Belarus, explains the girl. We're doing our best to spread the information about the search for Yana's family in all the social networks, trying to find all the clues, but no news so far. It's physically impossible to go to Irpin. Volunteers who are there can check the basement, but we have no idea where they might be now. And the guys who take people out of there go literally under the bullets. Most likely they do not keep lists of evacuees. So we hope that our relatives just found a safe place and are afraid to leave. When they tried to leave the city, many people were shot by Russians who spare neither children nor women. Alexandra herself and her family are now in a safer place. The girl did not name the town, but told me that there is fighting nearby. We fall asleep and wake up to the sounds of falling shells in the distance. All the basic necessities are there, the only thing is very poor communication. No one expected it to be this serious, and the whole family now regrets that they could not persuade Yana and Maxim to leave. We are very anxious and even more, we're constantly calling relatives, friends, and acquaintances to see if there's any new information about the search, and it's very emotionally exhausting. Of course, we want to believe that they were able to leave, but the question remains. Why haven't they contacted anyone and reported it? At the same time, we are trying to support each other, to keep a cool head and hope for the best. After all, there are cases where people have contacted us even after 3 weeks spent in the basement of Irpin. The most important thing for us now is to know that they are safe. And as soon as possible, we will definitely meet them. It's very scary now to look at your ruined city, which recently was buzzing with life. But all this can be rebuilt. Everything can be restored as it was, and the people who wanted to save themselves, but Russian soldiers did not give them that chance, cannot be brought back. Or so because they have a small child with them. We go to sleep and wake up thinking that it must be over quickly and that fewer innocent people will be harmed. Fear, sadness, despair, hatred. These emotions are a big part of our lives now, but we will win this war, we believe in it. Says Alexandra in the end. We know that a rocket hit my father-in-law's house in early March, the house was on fire. Quote, not long ago, the family of Tatiana from Kiev was looking for their close friends. On February 26, contact with the young family disappeared. What happened to them? No one knew for more than 2 weeks. Only a few days ago their relatives and friends learned that they were alive. All we were able to find out was that our friend and her young son were able to go abroad and her husband stayed there, that they all spent 12 days in a cellar or basement. But we just care about the fact that they are alive and well. I saw a post on Instagram about how the village of Katyuzhanka in the Kiev region, where the guys moved to at the beginning of the war, was under Russian troops and the occupiers were throwing people out of their houses, occupying those houses, barricading themselves in them. So we also considered the possibility that our friends, unfortunately, may not be alive. People were out of touch from the second day of the war. All this is very scary. Our friend stayed in the village, there is still no light, no communication, no our troops. Tatiana herself with her husband and child, who is only 1 year and 8 months old, has not left Kyiv. She has been waiting out the explosions and shelling in the basement of a rented private house and says that the capital, compared to Bucha, Irpin and Borodyanka, is peaceful and quiet. Not far from Borodyanka, in the village of Druzhnia, her father-in-law is also missing. Now Tatiana's family is focused on finding him. My husband's father's name is Dubrov Stanislav Nikolaevich. He lived in a small house, a 2-story house with 16 apartments. It stands on the outskirts of the village. We know that a rocket hit this house in early March. It was on fire, but we don't know what condition the building is in now. We don't understand if my father has a place to live. For several days we did not know what happened to him until he called from someone else's phone number and said he was alive. He told me that the Russian troops had occupied the village and that they were driving around in tanks and APCs and just bombarding all the houses. After this conversation, communication with the man was cut off again for several days. On March 7, Tatiana's family was able to call the same unknown number. My husband's father's name is Dubrov Stanislav Nikolaevich. He lived in a small house, a 2-story house with 16 apartments. It stands on the outskirts of the village. We know that a rocket hit this house in early March. It was on fire, but we don't know what condition the building is in now. We don't understand if my father has a place to live. For several days we did not know what happened to him until he called from someone else's phone number and said he was alive. He told me that the Russian troops had occupied the village and that they were driving around in tanks and APCs and just bombarding all the houses. After this conversation, communication with the man was cut off again for several days. They must have charged the phone from some generator. The father said they were sitting in a cellar without food, water, light or anything else. The whole village was a church, a cemetery, 3 stores and houses. There were a lot of people in that cellar. Maybe there were wells somewhere near the private houses where you could get some water, but nobody could even get out of the cellar, because everyone was shot in the street. That's what my father used to say. Tatiana and her husband, like many Ukrainians now, constantly monitor social media. We charge our phones several times a day. The internet is always on, no matter where we are or what we do. If we have a minute for tea, we go straight to check all the information we have. A lot of publics are reposting the same thing, and you read it all in a circle. Also, all the comments, for example, on the channel of the same Borodyanka. On March 7, Tatiana's family was able to call the same unknown number. When you read about some village where people are missing, you go to look at the map and think, well, something happened there, and this is not far from Druzhnia. At least this way we try to understand what the situation in the area is like. Before, though, we didn't even know the names of these villages and settlements. And now we are learning the geography of the Kiev region, jokes the girl. We saw that the evacuation from Borodyanka was announced several times, and we hoped that people in the village would know and be able to walk there. But the road there is open, it's not safe, says the interlocutor and tells us that she knows the last thing about that region. On March 16 we could clearly hear shots fired from there. It was our troops conducting a counterattack on the Russians and seemingly pushing them back to the Makarov and Borodyanka districts. This is the information I read in some Telegram channels, of which I have already accumulated about 100 lately. Every day we sit in them, in Facebook, in all kinds of thematic channels. We write there and ask who and what heard about Druzhnia. No response. We are trying to at least monitor the situation. Tatiana and her husband are helped by a small child to distract from the difficult news and constant search worries. It helps just this, must. We have to feed him, we have to play, we need to go for a walk. This is a lifeline for me and my husband, so we do not sink into everything completely. But we live with a sense of total anxiety, hopelessness. The young mother calms down for a few seconds and continues to speak through her tears. We live in fear for our loved ones, for our lives, in calls to nowhere. You know, what if it's just us? Everything seems very scary from afar, but in reality it's not. This thought really saves us. We try not to spend all the time on the phone, because it absorbs us and gives us a sense of hopelessness. Every day we sit in them, in Facebook, in all kinds of thematic channels. We write there and ask who and what heard about Druzhnia. No response. We are trying to at least monitor the situation. Tatiana and her husband are helped by a small child to distract from the difficult news and constant search worries. It helps just this, must. We have to feed him, we have to play, we need to go for a walk. This is a lifeline for me and my husband, so we do not sink into everything completely. But we live with a sense of total anxiety, hopelessness. The young mother calms down for a few seconds and continues to speak through her tears. We live in fear for our loved ones, for our lives, in calls to nowhere. You know, what if it's just us? Everything seems very scary from afar, but in reality it's not. This thought really saves us. We try not to spend all the time on the phone, because it absorbs us and gives us a sense of hopelessness. We try to do some kind of routine in order to stabilize our condition. I hate to say that we're ready for any outcome, but we are. We don't set ourselves up for the bad, but we know that anything can happen. This is a last resort. The girl chooses words to avoid saying out loud that something could have happened to her father-in-law. We hope that people from that cellar at least were able to go out and get water, some food. People always make some kind of supplies, rolls for the winter, potatoes stored in the cellar. There is no light in the village, but, you know, maybe in the village in the houses are some stoves and you can with them to survive it all. I believe that the world is not without good people, and if my father-in-law and others have nowhere to live, someone sheltered them. Maybe when my father called us, there was some critical situation, and then things got better and now they're our friends in Makarov, an urban-type settlement in Kiev Oblast. Note to Zerkalo. I.O. We're also without communication. It turned out that the towers there were blown up. We hope it is not that bad. How is your husband these days? Trying not to show any emotion whatsoever. But I know and can see what he is going through. It's his father. It's important for my husband to know that he's okay. And then life went on. When he learned that his father had problems, it was as if a huge cloud hung over him, although he did not show it, did not complain that he was hard or tired. The situation is the same here, says the girl. For us now, any information is already good. There is just no connection.